We are all tempted at times to eat too much of the wrong thing, but with obesity on the rise, Dr. Vera Tarman argues that some people are actually becoming addicted to food. Her new book, Food Junkies, looks at the unhealthy relationship some of us have with food. Dr. Tarman joins us now. Nice to have you here.
Yeah, I'm really delighted to be here.
I want to talk more about this. How do you know you're a food addict?
Well, okay, so, the food that we eat today is addictive. So when people overeat, which is pretty common now because of the foods that we have, you can't say that you're addicted to food. But the thing is you can almost see it as a continuum. And if you reach a certain point where the behaviors start to mimic behaviors like other addictions, that's when we call it a food addiction. It's really when the person wants to stop but they can't stop because they're so full and they really should stop but they can't
There's
stop.
no off button.
Yeah, there's no off button. The off switch has become faulty, either because of exposure or genetic predisposition or previous drug use of something else. And so then they start to have behaviors like hiding food, obsessing about food, craving particular foods instead of eating properly, like nutritious foods.
Even when they know they should.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, usually people when they're at this stage are going crazy, like they want to stop eating, but they just can't stop obsessing about it. Because at a certain point, it becomes a very unhappy lifestyle. It's not like you're just happy eating chips every night in front of TV.
Is the food taking the place of something?
It usually takes the place of almost everything eventually, depending on what stage you're at in the addiction. I mean, at first it's just, you might, instead of going out that night, stay with your chips and your TV. But eventually it becomes, instead of social engagement, instead of relationships, instead of work sometimes, I mean, it ends up taking over like any other addiction does.
We hear so much about emotional eating.
Yes.
And food replacing certain things. Tell us more about that.
Well, you see, the foods that were being, the processed foods basically are really engineered to attract our palate. So that, and we talk about comfort foods. Like the combination of sugar, fat, salt. Michael Moss wrote a wonderful book talking about that. The bliss point. It's not just about the reward and the pleasure. It's about how it makes you feel good. And I mean, it's engineered in that way to why it's so that we're kind of like sitting ducks to the food industry, it really does manage our moods. It really does.
You would think, when you think about food addiction, that would just be overeating. Mm-hmm. But you actually draw anorexia, an aversion to food, into this equation.
Yeah, that's right. You can even do that. Because what we're talking about now is the neurochemistry and how it's been miswired, rewired. And it's all about the neurochemistry, just like with drugs, with alcohol, cocaine, even with anorexia, when a person's not eating, whenever you're hungry, you think about food. Right. Anybody. So an anorexic is obsessed about food. They're not eating it, but they're obsessed about it. And the anticipation of eating, even if they don't eat, is actually its own pleasure. And I'm making the argument, which is kind of stepping out of the standard medical model, that this anorexia could be a form of food addiction.
There are several stories in your book, people sharing their stories, and there's one woman named Ellen who says that she was introduced to overeating as a child, that her mother was the root cause.
That's right.
So maybe a word or two to parents and caregivers about this very important subject. Yeah,
I think that especially today with the foods that we give our children, the juices, the cereals, it's basically sugar, it's basically addictive food, we are potentially creating food addicts. And I would really ask parents to look very carefully about what they're giving their children, who have no choice but to eat that stuff, because it's kind of setting the stage for problems in the future.
All right, Dr. Tarman, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.